This is the brand new Laowa 15 to 35 millimeter T12 periscope lens, and it can go places that no other lens can go. Today, I'm gonna be pairing it up with the Profoto L600C RGB mono LED light to capture some pretty insane macro wide angle shots that are not possible with any other lens. If you're a photographer who does any sort of commercial or advertising work, you probably know that clients are demanding more and more video assets because, if we're being honest with ourselves, video almost always converts better than still images. If you don't believe me, just look at how many video ads you're seeing on Instagram or Facebook compared to still ads. It's a pretty big divide at this point. So if you're just a stills photographer, I highly recommend jumping into video as well because it's a highly in-demand field and it's incredibly easy for you as a photographer to transition into video. You absolutely should be offering both stills and video in your own business, and if you don't know where to start, definitely check out our Photographer's Guide to Filmmaking course. You can find that at fstoppers.com/store. If you want to support this channel, the discount code below applies to any tutorial in the Fstoppers store. Now today is pretty interesting because I'm going to be acting in this video both as a creative director, but also as a business owner of a brand new product. In just a few days, I'm going to be releasing my first non-photography related product. It's a baby bib, simply called the suction cup bib. Now this should be really fun because on one hand, I'm gonna get to come up with some really crazy video ideas that a potential client might be asking for, but on the other hand, I'm gonna have to actually try to bring these video ideas to life using the help of some groundbreaking new video gear. So for the last month or so, I have been shooting with this really fascinating lens made by Laowa. As I mentioned in the opener, this is a 15 to 35 millimeter T12 lens, and it allows you to capture some really eye-catching video that is both extremely wide angle and it has up to a 2x macro magnification. And when you pair all of that with this really strange periscope shaped lens, this thing is really unlike anything else on the market. Now, as you can imagine, or as you can see here, this whole system is going to need a rather crazy rigging system to mount to both a tripod or to a slider system so that I can make these shots as interesting as possible. So before I show you how I've actually been using this and some of the shots that I've been creating, let me give you a quick overview on some of the features of this lens. First, this is one of 4 lenses that Laowa has released this year, and all 4 of the lenses are macro parafocal zooms. Now, 2 of the lenses feature a 15 to 24 millimeter zoom lens, while the other 2, including this one, have a 15 to 35 millimeter zoom range, which is really unheard of for a probe lens like this. So not only are these lenses the first probe lenses with the ability to zoom, but they also have the widest field of view of any probe lens on the market today. These are also parafocal lenses, which means your subject is going to remain in focus if you zoom in or out during filming. If you have photography lenses, you know that every time you zoom in or out, you have to refocus, which makes zooming while filming nearly impossible. Now, most of the lenses that Laowa have released, the probe simply goes straight out from the camera, which allows you to do really simple push or pull shots very easily. This one looks very different because this is the 45-degree periscope lens. As you can see, it has a 45-degree bend here, and this allows you to mount the lens literally millimeters off of the ground, which can be really difficult with a traditional tripod. And the 45-degree angle allows you to still get into some really tight spaces, as you'll see here in a minute. Which one of these is going to be best for you really depends on the application that you're shooting. There are times where I wish that I had the probe that just went straight out because I think it would be a little bit easier. But for the baby bib that I'm going to be filming, I felt like the 45 angle would just give me a little bit more variety, especially when I had some really interesting shots that might be difficult to do with a standard probe lens. Next, let's talk about the aperture on these lenses. The two 15 to 24 millimeter lenses let in a little bit more light at T8, while the lenses like I have here with the wider 15 to 35 millimeter range, they're a little bit slower at T12. Now, if you're a photographer, you're probably not as familiar using T-stops, but essentially T8 is similar to maybe F8, and T12 might be closer to F13. It's just over 1 stop light difference between the 2 different lens options, but if you want the extra zoom range, definitely keep this in mind. Now, as you probably can tell, the aperture on these lenses isn't extremely fast, so it's not gonna be great for that super shallow depth of field and low light look, but instead these lenses are really designed to give a wild, claustrophobic wide-angle perspective, so the aperture on these lenses is actually pretty fast for a probe lens like this. So as you can imagine, if you use a macro lens or one of these probe lenses, you are going to need a ton of constant light to light your scene, and you still might need to crank your ISO pretty high for a correct exposure. For this entire video series, I've been using this bad boy. This is the brand new Profoto L600C mono LED light, which is their most powerful point source light that has RGB LEDs as well as 3 different white LEDs so that you can create over, I think it's 16 million different colors. What's really interesting for photographers is unlike other LED lights, this one can be controlled and triggered through their Pro Connect remote with HSS, so it can also be used for photography as well. 2 years ago, I happened to be in Sweden and I got to visit the Profoto headquarters when they were actually developing these things. I couldn't tell anybody about what I saw, but one thing that's really unique about their video lights is that these are water cooled, which means it doesn't have a loud fan that's constantly trying to cool the lamp. And it also means that the LEDs are more stable, which ultimately means you get better color accuracy. This light's also unique because it has no ballast or extra cables. Everything is built into the unit itself. And because it has that water cooling built into it, this light is actually much lighter weight than if you had the ballast built in and you had to cool everything just with fans. And finally, perhaps what I like about this lighting system more than any of the other lighting systems that I have here in the studio is that if you're a photographer and you already have a bunch of light modifiers, you can use all of them on this light except for the OCF, I believe. So all of the big softboxes, all the speed rings, all the grids, all the beauty dishes, all of those can be mounted, and I can get all of those same precise lighting effects that I'm used to using with my strobes with this powerful LED light as well. So I'll show the exact lighting setups that I'm going to do here in a minute, but just keep in mind, if you're using any macro or probe lens, you're definitely going to want to use a powerful constant light to light your scene. Now for my baby bib product, I have chosen to use my older Panasonic GH5S with this probe lens because I want the ability to shoot 1080 at all the frame rates, up to 240 frames per second if I need to. Now I also do shoot with Sony, and I have a few Sony a7 IV cameras in the other room, but that camera crops into the sensor when you shoot at 60 frames per second, which is going to prevent me from getting the crazy wide angle field of view that I really want. Now you can mount this lens to any camera that you own, but you are going to need a specific adapter. This probe lens, it comes in the PL mount, which is pretty common in the video world, but if I want to use it with my GH5, I'm going to need the PL to micro 4/3 adapter, which is also a 0.7x focal reducer. Now we'll get a little nerdy here for a second. The GH5S has a micro 4/3 sensor in it, and it gives you a 2x crop factor, but now I also have a 0.7x reducer. So the final field of view for this lens will wind up being around 21 millimeters to 49 millimeters, if my math is correct. Now my Sony cameras, because they're full frame, should not have any crop factor, but if I want to shoot at 1080/60, it's going to automatically put a 1.5 crop factor in. So if I do the math there, on this lens, instead of being a 21 millimeter lens, it's now going to act as a 22.5 millimeter, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that 1.5 millimeter on the wide angle can actually be pretty substantial. So some of you are probably gonna say, Patrick, you still should have used the full frame camera. Leave your comments below and let me know why that's the case. But basically what I want you guys to understand is if you use this lens on different camera bodies and then you have to use different adapters, the math on the actual field of view can get a little complicated. So as you can see here, I have the lens mounted to my camera, but I've also set up this really complex tripod rig underneath it. And essentially, there is no way that you would want to mount your camera to any kind of tripod or slider and put all of the lens weight on the mount. So ideally, what you would do is find some center point where half of the weight of the lens and half of the weight of the camera could be right down the middle, and that's gonna give you the most stability. So let me get up out of this space, we'll move over to the shooting space, and I can show you how I've rigged this up to my slider, as well as some other little techniques that I've discovered that have helped make me get more stable shots, but have also made setup and breakdown much quicker and easier. So here we are at the other Fstoppers studio. This is where we do all of our product photography type shots. And I want to go through just a couple quick tips that I have learned doing this entire process that might be able to save you a lot of headache. First, let's talk about how I wound up mounting this to my tripod because it was a lot more difficult than I initially would have anticipated. All of these probe lenses, they come with these ring collars that allow you to attach them at different locations around the lens. and give you extra support if you need it, and I guarantee you, you're definitely gonna wanna take advantage of those. So I have a bunch of these different mending plates, and I thought, oh, I'll just screw it to where it balances perfectly on the back of the camera and then on the front of this ring collar. But unfortunately, these tripod mending plates, these don't always have holes that line up exactly where you need them. So I actually found all of these were quite useless. So what I wound up having to do is I had to just kind of MacGyver this and put a mending plate between two of the longer Manfrotto tripod plates. This isn't gonna win any design awards, but at the end of the day, it wound up working perfectly. So since I'm using these longer Manfrotto tripod plates, I had to change the tripod fluid head that I usually use, which has a smaller plate, to this much more robust one here. This is the MVH 500AH tripod head. And what I love about this is it just makes it a lot easier to move the camera in a more precise way because it's made for larger setups. So here, if you can see this, I can just pop this right in here, tighten it down, and we are good to go. So let's talk about sliders, because you're going to get the biggest production value if you pair up these periscope probe lenses with some kind of automated slider. Unfortunately, the slider that I have here is my absolute favorite. This one's made by Rhino. This is called the Rhino Arc. And unfortunately, this company has gone out of business in the last few years. I just found this out recently. I really love their products. I think they have the best slider I've ever used, but you're probably either gonna have to buy this used, or if you guys have a recommendation for an even better compact slider that allows you to do both arcing moves and go across a carrier, let me know in the comments below, because I'm definitely in need of a brand new motorized slider. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see this with all the junk I have on my desk here, but one problem with the periscope design is you're not going to be able to utilize the entire slider if you face the camera forward and you want that push-pull shot, because the periscope part of the lens is going to run into your slider. So what you can do is you can just kind of put this off center, and that's gonna give you a different type of movement. It's not gonna be perfectly on the X-axis, or you're gonna have to come up with a clever way to mount this so that the lens goes above the slider. But as you can see here, now my lens is kind of facing up. So this was a huge challenge that I had with this particular photo shoot, and it's one reason where I think the straight probe would be very handy in certain situations. But if I turn this sideways and I run the entire camera parallel to my rails, that's where this periscope design is really gonna be most useful. Now, typically, I'm not one who likes to rig up a bunch of external monitors to my cameras. I'm more of a run and gun sort of guy, and I just frame up a good shot and then I work with it back in post. But with macro shots and moving shots like this, connecting your camera to a large monitor like I have here, I think is really, really key, because there are so many little things that I would never notice on the back of the screen or even on an external field monitor that become quite apparent when you are viewing it on a 27-inch monitor. Little things like water and dust on your scene, or maybe a little jiggle in your rig, or if you get water on the lens, sometimes it's gonna be really hard to see that. Having your image on a large screen means that you can preview everything and be really happy with the final shot. But I also found that if I need to start getting close to the lens and staging things, or if I need to be performing by pouring something at a very specific moment, it's really nice to be able to turn the monitor around so that I can see it from, opposite the camera. And then I can use my monitor to time all of the drops and motion and action shots perfectly. Now, speaking of timing splashes, if you're gonna be doing splash photography or videography, it's really important that you lay something on the ground so that all of your splashes don't mess up your floors, and more importantly, it makes cleanup really easy. For a lot of these shots, I've been using tomato sauce, but I've also been using a lot of milk, and I quickly learned that if I don't clean up the milk immediately, I will forget about it, and then the next day I come into the studio, the whole place smells rancid. So definitely put some large mill plastic sheets down to protect your floors, and if you're gonna be doing a lot of splash photography, I've even used some of these kiddie pools, because this is going to be a lot more robust than just some plastic on the floor. Another useful tip that I discovered early on that not everybody's gonna have access to is having some sort of motorized standing table. Instead of mounting my slider on two tripods, I just put it on this tabletop that's connected to a motor so that I can raise it or lower it if I wanted to, stand or sit at this desk. And that has been a lifesaver. I can't tell you how many times I needed the lens to just be half an inch lower or higher, and having a desk that can go up or down really quickly has made shooting with this whole setup a complete game changer. This desk also is fitted with some roller wheels, so not only can I raise and lower the desk, But if I need to move something a little bit closer or, build space for a light stand or something like that, it's really nice just being able to move my entire workstation away from my backdrop. And the final little tip that I have for you guys before I start showing you some of the videos that I've created is using a white seamless backdrop. Now, normally I would use white seamless paper, but I found that we were completely out of that here in the studio. And instead I use this transom paper by Savage. I'll put a link to all of this stuff in the description below. This translume paper is great because it's a little bit of a plastic feel, so you can wipe it down a lot easier than you can white paper. That's gonna leave a bunch of stains, especially if you're doing splash photography. But it also allows you to shoot a light behind it and through it much easier, so you can have more effective backlighting instead of trying to blast a bunch of light into the paper itself. So hopefully all these little things can help make your shooting situation a little bit smoother and more practical. But at the end of the day, I think it's really about having a lot of fun. So let me show you some of the really interesting shots that I've been taking over the last month or so. I've had this set up for quite a while now, and it has been a blast working with this lens. Now, one little thing I'm noticing with the periscope setup is that this lens, it can bounce really easily. So I think I can make this a little bit more stable by using this little rig and adding some weight to the bottom of the lens. To add the perfect amount of weight, I'm just gonna put these washers on here. You can also loosen this screw here, and it allows me to completely change the framing of my shot. And what's great about this is instead of trying to level the camera and your subject and the table, sometimes that takes a lot of time, you can actually just recompose the shot by twisting the lens. It gives you a lot of flexibility, and I find that I actually leave this just slightly unscrewed so that I can make those adjustments really easily without the lens being so loose that it then moves really quickly. Now obviously I've been spending a lot of time really refining the movements of my slider and trying to get everything on the camera side looking good. But another thing I've noticed that makes a huge difference is the lighting, and I think a lot of videographers sometimes ignore this aspect. So with the Profoto L600, I have been changing the modifier. Right now I have this grid on here. If I pull the grid out, you can see how much more spill and light there is. This is a 30-degree grid, and you can see it's really adding some nice gradients on the bib and the product shot. So I think for a future shot, I'm gonna use a large softbox to illuminate a larger scene, but I think for this moving shot, the 30-degree grid is the way to go. So this first shot needs to showcase how the bib can contain all sorts of spills. Now that I have the camera movement where I want it, I have the slider oscillating back and forth. I really only have one attempt to pour the milk down, and then I'm gonna have to rebuild this entire setup with another clean bib. Realistically, I'm probably gonna have to film this at least 10 times. Now I need to rotate the lens 180 degrees so I can get a top-down view. The goal here is to show how the lip of the bib keeps your table clean. So for this shot, I have the lens going right past the raisin box, really following the lip of my bib to show that none of the liquid falls out. Look how close that comes to hitting. You could never do that with any other lens. All right, so this one's fun. I made this bib and put rest in peace on it, and the idea is kind of a graveyard shot. So I'm gonna create like a reveal shot by putting a bib in front of the lens, and then as it moves forward, I'll lift it up. And then over here on the side, I have a little smoke machine, so I'm gonna add a little graveyard smoke.
Your current baby bib had a good run, but it's time to pay your respect and move on.
So I'm day 3 into filming all of the B-roll for this, and I'm starting to realize that a lot of the shots that I've filmed so far, they just look like macro shots, but to the untrained eye, they don't really look like a probe lens necessarily. If you were to just try to film this with a normal mirrorless camera and a macro lens, you'd quickly realize that there is no way that you could get the lens in the correct position, but the shots themselves do not scream, oh my gosh, what in the world did he use to film that? And so for this next shot, I want to change all of that. I want an image where it is very clear that the lens is pulling through a very claustrophobic scene where the camera looks like it's dollying out of something that is just not possible. So I want to market towards parents who are going through the phase right before the baby bib, and that's gonna be the nursing or baby bottle stage. And so I filled up this basin full of all these really popular baby bottles, and I've also put some cleaning brushes and all of the usual suspects that any new parent would clearly recognize, and hopefully I can put a tagline over this, something that might be like, if you thought cleaning bottles was the messiest part of your life, just wait till they start using a bib. Something like that. And I think by adding all of these dynamic movements to the shots, I'm gonna persuade the viewer that this is a very high production and that there is no way that this was taken with just a normal camera and lens.
If you thought cleaning bottles was the messiest part of having a baby, just wait until they start eating solids.
Now this lens is also waterproof up to about 12 inches, so here I've placed the lens right at the water line and I'm letting it push through some bubbles. Okay, if this setup doesn't make you laugh, you just simply don't have a sense of humor. So I bought this doll mainly as a stand-in so that I could get the bib to be latched in a normal way and I could show elements of hands and kind of make it feel a little bit more realistic. Putting a real child in this setup and tinkering with all this stuff would just be a nightmare. So this doll is realistic enough, and then I've done kind of a Home Alone setup here where I've run this fishing line to her hand, and just by pulling on this with one hand, I can add just enough movement to where I think it's going to be believable. Obviously, I can't showcase the whole doll or you would immediately say that's a fake baby, but I think just having some of the clothing or the hands in the frame is just enough to sell the effect. So for this shot, I wanted to get away from all of the milk and I wanted to do something that looks even more messy, so I've used some tomato sauce and some orange juice, just some different colors. Initially for the scene, I just had this white piece of plexi in the foreground and I felt like it was too boring. So I wound up adding just a few little snacks here towards the front of the lens to give it that parallax look. I think it really makes the shot come together. Now for lighting, I'm using two L600s. The first one I have here with the grid. Although I generally love the look of soft light coming through the softbox, I find that I enjoy the dramatic lighting that I'm getting with the grid. And as you've noticed through many of these shots, this is my preferred light modifier. The second L600 is just off camera, firing into the background. I wanted to set up something that looked a little bit more like a kitchen instead of just a black studio like we've been doing. So I think that really helps to bring out some of the detail in the background here. Another impactful shot is to show the suction cup bib in contrast to the most popular bib on the market. For this setup, I used the roll of Translume as my background, and I rigged up both bibs so they were facing each other. The goal is to show my bib catching all the child's mess, while at the same time showing how much doesn't get caught by the other bib.
One of these bibs is doing its job. The other is just creating more work.
Now, I haven't framed up a composition that shows the entire bib yet, so this will be a hero shot that lets the viewer get a sense of what the suction cup bib looks like in its entirety. For variety, I set the Profoto L600C to different colors, as well as captured a clean white shot. I also happen to have this pacifier, and I could imagine a tagline based around both your baby and the bib evolving.
Because your toddler shouldn't be the only one progressing.
I love the simplicity of this shot. The biggest problem with my competitor's bib is it still allows a lot of food to go in between the table and the bib, and it really does nothing to protect your tables or your floor. Framing this shot took way longer than I thought, but I think the payoff was definitely worth the effort.
How many bibs have you used that claim to catch your entire child's mess, only to then become the mess?
This would not be possible without this extreme wide-angle view. This final shot was the hardest, but this is really what the probe lens was made for. I hot glued most of this pirate's booty in place, and then I tested shots with both my own hand and the fake baby doll hand. For lighting, I used a single Profoto 1x4 silver strip box to backlight the scene. So there you go, the Laowa 15-35 T2 probe lens and the Profoto L600C spotlight. If you guys enjoy content like this, make sure you subscribe to our channel below. Also head over to fstoppers.com for free daily content. And while you're on the website, head over to fstoppers.com/contest where you can check out our monthly Critique the Community photo contest, where we give away some really cool photographic prizes as well as our tutorials. And speaking of tutorials, you can also check out all of our photo education and video education over at fstoppers.com/store. All of our viewers can use the discount code below to save 15% off anything in your cart. And like I said at the beginning of this video, if you're a photographer just getting into videography, definitely check out our Photographer's Guide to Filmmaking course, where Lee and I go through everything that you need to know how to start shooting video off of your still cameras and producing really compelling video content. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and if you have a baby or know somebody with a baby, head over to suctioncupbib.com and pick up your suction cup bib today.